Hey folks, today I'm going to be bringing you a Frostclaw video specifically about how targeting your skill in different ways can vastly increase the damage that you deal, especially single target. So in the clip you can see in the background, I did a test on Shade of Orbis where I used all the same gear, all the same skill specs, and I frame by frame calculated how much time it took me to do exactly 10% of the Shade's health. And on the left, you can see I'm aiming away from the boss, and on the right, I'm aiming directly at it. And what's really interesting is that on the left test, where I'm aiming away from the boss, I actually do almost twice as much damage. The reason this is happening is a little bit counterintuitive at first, but when you actually dig in, it's pretty cool. So what's happening here is the frozen malice. It says targets a random enemy that is 3 to 9 meters away from the original target location. So the 3 meters here is actually the minimum range. So you'll notice if you stand directly on the boss and target also on the boss, Frozen Malice doesn't do anything because you're inside the minimum range. However, if you target at least 3 meters away from the boss, like say you target over here-ish, and then you attack, the bounces that normally go way off the edge of the screen, they actually come back and also hit the boss. So you have the normal one that comes back to you and casts backwards anyway, and you have that one coming back and bouncing, and both of them can hit. So you have a bit of a shotgun effect going on there. To demonstrate this a little bit more scientifically, I crafted a weapon that has exactly 100% chance to shred. So each hit will always apply 1 stack of shred, and then I hit the shade a bunch of times with different targeting to determine which gives me the most hits on the shade. So here we are in a shade fight for a little bit of testing. What I've noticed is that a normal cast on the boss without using the malice or anything like that is going to give us 15 shred stacks. So there we are with the 15 shred stacks. We'll do it one more time. So there's 15. It's pretty consistent. And if we stand right up close to the shade and we cast through the shade and it bounces back into it, we usually get 20 shred stacks. So there, we'll do it again. So there's 20. But what I've actually noticed is really interesting is if you stand right up on the shade and then you aim at a 90-degree angle to the shade. So you can see the shade here is just north of me. If I aim 90 degrees from the shade and then the Frostclaw bounces back through, I actually get even more hits. So in the DPS test in the beginning of the video, I wasn't even doing this, so my damage would have been even higher. But doing this here, we get 25. So that's almost 2 times as many hits just from the Frostclaw alone on the shade by doing this. So to summarize, make sure you stand somewhere very close to the shade, and then you aim 90 degrees from the shade. What's also cool is that because of how many times we're hitting per second now, nodes like Celestial Doom and Jagged Veil actually provide a crazy amount of ward. Just see how quick my ward goes up while fighting this shade. It's probably obvious to you by now how useful it is to have a lot more hits. Having about 60% more hits, that is, gives us around 60 to 70% more damage with hit-based Frostclaw builds, and it also means that we're applying about that many more ailments as well, like shred, poison, and anything that stacks up, so this is very important for that. And it also gives us a lot more ward through the ward on hit type effects, like I just mentioned, but it even goes a little bit further. There's also a benefit to the Nova setup too. You can see here in Paint what I've shown is the normal technique of aiming right beside yourself where the boss is versus this new targeting technique where you aim away from the boss, and it shows where all the bounces of your Frostclaw and also the Novas end up being. So if we look at the first one here, the classic aiming directly at the boss, you can see that normally you shoot your Frostclaw to where the X is here, where the boss also is. And normally what happens is the Malice does not proc, so the bounce continues away from the boss, and then it continues away from the boss again. And by the time you get to that third bounce, the Novas tend to be outside the range of the boss, and you usually don't actually get those procs. So that's even with a lot of AoE, it's going to be pretty far. You're probably not going to be applying the Novas. Um, so that's you losing about 20% of your Novas hitting. And that's a pretty big chunk of our damage because that's how we apply most of our spark charges. With the new targeting method, assuming you're using Malice, you can see that if you target away from the boss, the first Frostclaw shoots out the 2 bounces back to you, and those both spawn the Nova around yourself and the boss, and then it bounces back further again, and both of those Novas will also be within range of the boss. So in this case, not only are you getting about 70% more hits with the Frostclaw itself, you're also getting 5 Nova procs instead of the normal 4. So it might be possible, depending on your setup, that you are getting 5 already, but this is definitely going to be a lot more consistent. And it does seem like it's a pretty strong setup if you're able to run Malice in your build. And even if you are not running Volley of Glass, so if you're running the low mana setup where you don't run Volley of Glass and you can much more easily take Malice, this setup will still benefit you quite a bit. So you can do that to help boost your damage a little bit against bosses. This has kind of been a little bit of an experimental video, just trying to test some things out and do some theory crafting. So yeah, hope you guys liked it. That's pretty much all I have for today. And cheers.